Hi there, this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, and welcome to another random review. Again, this is a slightly different TV review. This is Series 1 of Ulysses 31, which is, if you're not familiar, an 80s cartoon show which was a Japanese-French co-production from 1981 and 1982, even though in the UK I would have seen it in 1985. 1986. You can let me know when it was aired around the world where you are. I think it was aired in 19 different countries. And it's not only entertaining, it's also educational because it's based on the Greek myths. So you basically have, it's the Odysseus tale, or Ulysses in Latin. So he leaves Troy to go back to Earth to his wife Penelope, but along the way his son Telemachus is kidnapped by a glowing orb of energy and taken to this planet where a cult worships the Cyclops, which is a robot or a robotic demon that asks for sacrifices. So they suck the energy from children. So it ends up that Ulysses destroys the Cyclops, which the disciples of the cult aren't happy about, and they curse him and they want the vengeance of the gods, which is the title of episode 1. So the gods punish him, specifically Poseidon. They trap him in Olympus and send him out in a different galaxy, lost. He has to find the kingdom of Hades to have any chance of getting back to Earth. And the crew is in suspended animation for the journey, and he is left alone with his son and Yumi, who is a Zotranian, along with her brother Numenor, but he's in suspended animation as well because they were in a coma recovering from their scrape with the Cyclops cult. They are spared the suspended animation, and there's a little robot, Nono, who's obviously the comic relief in the same way Snarf would be the comic relief in Thundercats, or Uni would be the comic relief in Dungeons and Dragons. So that's essentially the setup. There's 26 episodes. Obviously there's nods to Star Wars with the kind of lightsaberish guns that Ulysses uses. There was actually a court battle over a piece of music that the series used. There was a French soundtrack and a Japanese soundtrack, which I think you can now pick up on the internet, and obviously the English dub, which obviously I saw in 1985 and 1986. It's a wonderful show. Like I said, it's educational as well. So I'm just going to go through the first season episode by episode. It has a wonderful theme tune, which I'm not going to sing, but you can look that up in YouTube if you're not familiar with it. It's so wonderful, and it teaches us about the Greek myths. Like I said, there's 26 episodes, so there's 9 episodes in season 1. So the first episode, it's funny because the pre-credit sequence of the first episode pretty much tells you what's going to happen in the first episode. There was a pilot that screened in Japan but wasn't shown anywhere else. so you pretty much know what's going to happen in the first episode before the first episode happens. But again, it's quite wonderful. This season pretty much, or the whole series pretty much, tells you that gods aren't a good thing. They're very petty and have knee-jerk reactions, and they get very upset when you diss them, and they love their punishments. So Ulysses has a lovely big beard and a flowing locks of hair. Telemachus, who may be about 9 years old, it's his birthday in the first episode, and there's 9 candles in the cake, whether that's true or not. He's a typical teenage boy. He's a fantastic pilot. He's sometimes hot-headed and makes mistakes, but who didn't when they were 9 years old? Again, Yumi and Numenor, who are Zotranians. There's a little bit of telepathy going on there. She's obviously company for Telemachus. No at times can be a little bit annoying as a little red robot, but he's not that annoying in comparison to other comic relief characters of cartoons of the 80s. There's hints at 2001, there's hints at Silent Running, because during the season you see they have this kind of dome of grassland. There's even cows grazing on it that Telemachus flies through in his little jet scooter. So the first episode is wonderful. The fact that, you know, it sets them up. The crew is in suspended animation, and they just have to find their way. The ship is called the Odyssey, and it's in the shape of an eye, with an iris in the middle. The computer is Shurka, which has some kind of Japanese translation to katana, which is kind of like Circe, which is a translation for knowledge. Circe was a really wise one. Yumi, again, that's translation of Theris, which is one of the Titans. The voice of Shurka is almost like a female Hal. She has a very nice voice. She does have some wonderful phrases as the season goes on. So the first episode is wonderful. It sets up the whole series. Ulysses has angered the gods, so he's got to be punished, because that's how gods roll, basically. So the second episode is the Lost Planet. This is where one of the episodes where Numenor comes back to life because they're close to one of the planets of Zotra. But it's the 7th satellite planet of Zotra they come across, which was the Holiday Planet. So they go down because Yumi and Numenor remember going there as children, but the planet is deserted, and when Ulysses and Numenor go down, they find people that have been turned into stone, but in a very nice touch, their shadows are still running, which is a lovely little eerie touch. And they realise that there's a sorceress living under the planet. And again, I'm not going to go into too much details. There's a flying unicorn in it, and there's an appearance by the Hydra. So that's another wonderful episode. Episode 3 is the Black Sphere, and we come across characters Heratos and Athena, who's also a Zotranian. And Heratos, when he found Athena, took her in. He found her in a deserted spaceship, and he comes across this black sphere which contained the map of Olympus and how to get out of Olympus. But the gods punished him by making him blind, so he couldn't actually write down or remember what the map was. So he lives in this deserted planet with Athena, luring ships into the graveyard of the wrecks and hulks, and the gods say to him they'll give him his sight back if they wreck Ulysses and destroy Ulysses. And Shurka warns about the zone of gravitational attraction. So that's the synopsis of that one. Again, another solid episode. Next is episode 4, The Guardian of the Cosmic Winds, which is a bit strange. Again, we've got this father-daughter relationship. It's her birthday, so the father amuses her by trapping people. He has the 4 winds as guests, and they're just dressed in robes, and there's just wind coming out of their faces. So he traps Ulysses in the ship and gets Ulysses involved in some death games. There's a target practice where the 4 winds are firing lasers at him. There's a game of deadly chess, which is well done. And then there's a pinball machine, a life-size pinball machine that Ulysses has to survive. And there's also a kind of Pandora's box that Telemachus then turns on the villain. And then episode 5 is The Eternal Punishment, which is one of my favourites because it's a take on the Sisyphus legend, not the syphilis legend, because that's a completely different cartoon. The Sisyphus legend about the guy who has to push a rock up a hill for eternity and then it goes back down. So this version, it's a guy on a mining planet, or Sisyphus, who was the king of Corinth, who wanted to find the secret to immortality, but the gods didn't like that, because then humans would be immortal and they can't have that, obviously. But it's a nice twist. Instead of pushing a rock up a hill, this one there's a hole and he's at the bottom of the hole, and every day a rock rolls down to the edge of the hole and he has to break it apart to push it down the hole, and then another one appears at the top, and how we find out what's actually going on is quite a beautiful little twist how it's done. So again, Ulysses comes to that planet and the gods say, because they really don't like Ulysses for some reason, just because he killed just because they destroyed the pet of some cult that sucked the energy out of children. They're in the hub with them, I don't know. So they tell Sisyphus that if they get Ulysses to replace him, he can escape. Again, it's a wonderful episode. I'm not going to go into any more detail than that, but it's one of the classics. Episode 6 is Flowers of Fear. Again, they come into contact with a planet that's abandoned. The surface looks a lot like the surface of the Death Star, but never mind. And we find out it's like a hospital planet where the people who were there before pretty much cured disease. They cured death almost, and of course the gods weren't happy about that. So they pretty much cursed them by having these rather aggressive kind of metal robotic flowers who pretty much kill anything that comes onto the planet. Again, that's gods for you. At this point of the season, the catchphrases by Ulysses really come into the fore. By the Great Galaxy is the kind of standard one, but you get more as the season goes on. You get cursed comets, you get quivering quasars, which is a personal favourite, and probably Possibly my favourite is By the Spiraling Nebulas, as well as By the Multi-Faced Moon. But By the Great Galaxy is one that's used by pretty much all the characters. So that's another good one. Then we have episode 7, which is Mutiny on Board, which is they have a strange electric attack or an energy attack, and the crew come back to life, but for nefarious purposes. And obviously it upsets Yumi that Numenor comes back to lead them, but it's obviously bad Numenor, and they want to force Ulysses and take the ship to the reefs of space and destroy it. And this is where we're introduced to some of the robot crew, which take up arms to protect them against the crew. So that's another solid episode. And then we get to the last 2 episodes of the season, which are amongst the best. There are 2 classic episodes. Episode 8 is Secret of the Sphinx. So they go to a pyramid planet. You'll see a kind of theme. And another lovely phrase is By the Countless Constellations. What the heck's going on in here? So they're captured by the Sphinx and his daughter Hermione. The daughter seems obsessed with Ulysses and wants him as her slave. Not quite sure what that's about. And obviously the father and daughter are like lions with wings crossed with people. So the Sphinx gives Ulysses a riddle, surprise surprise, and if he gets it right he can escape. But obviously the daughter has other ideas, so she pretends to help the children out of their cage, but she leads them to a forbidden room where the mirror of truth lies, and it's forbidden to go in there, but she tells them to go ahead. So needless to say, she has her own trial for Ulysses because she wants him for her slave. It's a wonderful episode. There's even an appearance by Escher's stairs. If you're familiar with MC Escher, you know the stairs, which was also appeared in Labyrinth as well with David Bowie. That's another classic episode. And then the finale of season 1 is another corking episode. It's Kronos, Father of Time. So they are under attack, the ship is about to be destroyed, but for some reason time stops and they appear on this time planet, which is actually in the shape of a sundial, which is quite nice as well. And they meet Kronos, who has 2 faces for some reason. I don't know if that's a 12-hour clock and a 24-hour clock. And strangely enough, he's been exiled by the gods, but he's heard of Ulysses' adventures. I don't know, it's the 31st century, so I don't know whether they must have really fast broadband, because Ulysses is now famous amongst all these planets. So he wants to get Ulysses back to the gods, and then he'll be taken back to Mount Olympus. There's lots of wonderful touches in this, with clocks, because they're in this kind of time planet. The crew on the Odyssey are going to die because they're aging at an accelerated level. So there literally is a ticking clock. It's a wonderful episode. So for me, there's like 3 out of the 9 are absolutely magnificent episodes, and the rest are all solid. There's not a bad episode in the first season as far as I'm concerned. And also the stories, you do kind of go, I remember hearing about that in Latin class and classical studies at school. So it was an educational show and an entertaining show. It's one that, don't tell anybody, but it's amazing it hasn't actually been remade. I know there's kind of fan art of a kind of reimagining of Ulysses, but it's just a wonderful show. I got it on the DVD box set, which I probably should have showed at the start. Yeah, so there we go, that's the 26 episodes. So that's a wonderful set that I would recommend if you can get your hands on it. So that's season 1. It's 9 episodes, 216 minutes, and I would highly recommend it because it's just one of those fantastic cartoons of the 80s that was actually pretty intelligent and educational. So thank you very much for watching. Please let me know if you remember Ulysses 31, when it was actually televised in your country. Please let me know if you're from France or Japan, if they had the same catchphrases, or whether it was a completely different translation. So thanks so much for watching, and hopefully you'll join me for season 2 of Ulysses 31. This is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films saying check your quivering quasars, and farewell.